Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Khaldun Azhari. I'm moderating this event today. I'm a member of the club. Our event today is about the humanitarian situation in Iraq, which is in a very difficult situation, and there are a lot of casualties and victimized on a daily basis. And we heard that the Iraq war was supposed to be the war that will bring democracy and prosperity and happiness to Iraq. And we saw former President of the United States celebrating the mission accomplished, and everybody in the world was so happy about it. But now we see almost one of the worst humanitarian crises ever happened, along with Syria. So the situation in the area is far from settled, and we don't know where it's going. And we are not sure very much it's because of that war in Iraq, but everybody agrees in the Middle East, in the Arab countries, that that war was the main reason why we have this situation now. And we always think who should be accountable for it to give a solution. And our guest today is going to talk about this situation. And basically, our guest today is the World Food Program, WFP, Iraq officer. She's director of that office in charge. And she is the best to give us a field report about the situation and what is needed from the international community. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like you to welcome our guest speaker today, Ms. Jean Pearce. Thank you.
Do I have to turn this on?
I don't
need it?
Yeah,
Thank you very much, everybody. And I'm very honored to be here today to talk to you about the humanitarian situation in Iraq. I am the representative and country director of the World Food Program, but I am here today to talk to you about the needs of the entire international community and the plight of the Iraqi people. In order to frame our conversation, I will show you a very short video and then a brief PowerPoint presentation, and then I'd be very happy to open the floor to any questions you might have. Thank you.
ما حد اجى علينا منطقتنا كلهم يكرهونا.
مشكلة النازحين في العراق مشكلة كلش كبيرة. نحن بأمس الحاجة إلى مساعدة منظمات الأمم المتحدة ومنظمات الدولية لمساعدتنا في إيصال مساعدات عاجلة وأيضا في موضوع توزيع وإيواء للنازحين.
Since the beginning of this crisis, we have opened our budgets, our homes, to receive those people and to provide help. I believe we cannot deal with this situation on our own. Plus, it is an international responsibility.
إذا يقول لك بعد يومين أو بعد أسبوع صعبة، اليوم صعب. عندي أطفال صغار طبعا عانيت معاناة منهم يعني في المرة. خاولي طبعا تقعيه وما يبارد ونخليه يشفى هاي شنو ذنب الطفلة هاي؟ شنو ذنب هاي؟ قاعدة بخيمة بالصحراء.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just run you quickly through some of the major numbers and the situation in Iraq through a very brief overview of the PowerPoint. As I said, I'm here on behalf of the United Nations system in Iraq. We have agreed to work together to raise awareness about the situation in Iraq, which is one of the most complex and volatile that we currently have in the world. And this is a world where we have a lot of humanitarian crises. We have the numbers of people change constantly. The situation changes daily. It rapidly unfolds, and it means that we need a constant. We need to be constantly changing the way we provide assistance. The caseload and the level of assistance that we have been required to provide has quadrupled over the last 12 months. The crisis unfolds, another city falls, another group of people is displaced and needs our assistance. We currently believe that 8.2 million people need our assistance. And that number will go up to 10 million by the end of 2015. We have 3 million people who are actually displaced. These are people who have had to leave their homes. They're housed in camps or in host communities in over 3,000 locations across the country. Not one single province of Iraq or governorate is exempt from this. The crisis has gone right across the entire country. This map will show you where those people are. As you see, they're predominantly in the north and in the areas that are controlled by the armed opposition groups, but there are also smaller numbers in the south, the southern governorates. The number of people is quite amazing, and they need assistance now. We, in the World Food Programme, we believe that 4.4 million people have some level of food security, which is an increase of 57% in the last 6 months. Half of the displaced are without shelter and forced to live in abandoned homes. Families across the country, and particularly in the Kurdish areas, are struggling to cope and to meet the basic needs of themselves and their families. We have parts of the agricultural lands in the northern parts of the country that have been affected, and this will affect food production going into the harvest, which is now taking place. Water and sanitation is always a massive problem. And that also is breaking down, and we need to provide the people with water and sanitation, or we will have a greater humanitarian crisis than we already have. We have communities that have people who are hosted in their homes and in their communities. They also need a certain level of assistance as well, because in reality, the entire country is breaking down, and we need to do something to alleviate it. Not only is Iraq is in one of the countries in the region that that is suffering at the moment. We have problems with human rights and the rule of law. We have communities that have been generous, but that cannot continue to provide the same levels of assistance that they have up until now, because we need to take into consideration that we are now almost at the 18-month mark of the levels of displacement that continue to rise, and the drain on the resources continues to go on while the needs continue to rise. We are also worried that if the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate or is allowed to deteriorate, then the efforts towards national reconciliation will also fail. One of the areas of concentration that we focus in on is the human rights, because this is a protection issue. We've had various communities that have been broken up. Iraq was a country that enjoyed a large ethnic diversity. You had various communities. You had Yazidis, you had Turkmen, you had Assyrians, you had Christians, all living side by side, and that is now broken down. And that is an area that we're very, very concerned about. Women and girls, I know that this is a focus in Japan, but the situation for women and girls in this crisis has been alarming and frightening. We have large numbers of girls who have been killed, who have been abused, and who continue to suffer. And this continues to go on today, and we need to be able to monitor that, and we also need to be able to take care of those who have been affected. One of the big constraints that we have is that a third of the country is almost completely out of reach to us. If you have a look at the PowerPoint, the areas that are blue and dark blue, they are areas where we either cannot reach or can only reach sporadically. We estimate that there are 2.3 million people in those areas. We reach them sporadically. My agency, the World Food Programme, we provide food to people in these areas, but we do it only on a basis of security permitting. So that there are times when we cannot reach them, but they remain very high on our agenda, and we take any opportunity we can to take food and other assistance into those areas. We are of the strong belief that things are going to get worse. Things are not going to get better in Iraq. And up to 1.7 million more people are going to be in need as the year proceeds. We're worried about the continuation of fighting. We have identified 14 additional cities that may fall before the end of the year that will require our assistance. We anticipate that the destruction will be widespread. We know that after the battle for Fallujah, there was nothing left standing. In the city of 20 to 30,000 people, 100 were left at the end of the fighting. Everything had been destroyed, and we see this as the fighting continues. We anticipate that food will be scarce, that water will be a major problem. The temperature in Iraq at the moment is already hovering at the 50 centigrade mark, and we are only in the month of June. We still have the 3 hottest months of the summer to get through. So water is something that we will have to continue to focus on so that we make sure that we don't have people drinking contaminated water and further contributing to the humanitarian crisis. We also believe that people will continue to flee as the fighting continues. We have found that people move out of cities as ISIS nears their community, creating further displacement. We also are concerned about the possibility of restriction of movement in areas that are controlled by ISIS. that they will not allow the people to move out and out of harm's way. It's been a mammoth effort across the last 18 months. We're providing assistance for around 2.5 million individuals each month. There are 150 organisations partnering to do that. We, the World Food Programme, have provided food for approximately 2 million people every month. We have also provided emergency kits for people who are newly displaced through a mechanism that is an interagency mechanism that provides water, food, and some protection commodities when they are newly displaced. 400,000 people have received some sort of shelter. Vulnerable children and women are being taken care of. Temporary schools are being erected. And 5.3 million children have been vaccinated, and over 100 health facilities have been established. The operation scaled up very quickly in the middle of last year. It's about a year. The 10th of June is the anniversary of the fall of Mosul, which marked the rapid increase in the operations. Coordinating that and making sure that the assistance is being delivered to the right people has been a mammoth task. We have a humanitarian operations centre that we have established in both Baghdad and Erbil that coordinate the assistance from the various partners. And I just said there are 150 people who are providing, organisations that are providing assistance. We are trying to coordinate our pipelines so that we monitor where the assistance is going so it can all arrive at the same time or arrive in a steady stream. We are looking at common storage facilities, and we are also working on a contingency plan to be ready for anything else that may come as we move forward this year. And we are working more closely with the coordination mechanisms with the government. I want to be very clear that the government and the United Nations and its partners work very closely together. Frontline responses are a key component of this operation. The displacement is rapid and it is often without any pre-warning. None of us expected Ramadi to fall 2 weeks ago, but it did, and it meant another 200,000 people were displaced. When people ask me how many people are affected, it is hard for me to say a number because it changes all the time. For a long time, our needs were increasing by 100,000 people every week. And at the moment, we're saying that there are 3 million people. But one of the things that we have to do is be ready to respond to the needs of the people. What we are doing is we are working with communities and providing rapid response mechanism commodities in order to be able to meet the needs of the people. These needs are also going into areas that are not controlled by the government. We have contracts with NGOs, both national and international, that help us get the food and the water and the medicines into the areas that we don't have access to make sure that the needs of the people are taken. One of the reasons that I'm here speaking to you today is because unless the United Nations gets an immediate injection of cash, 50% of operations will have to close down in the coming months. And this is something that is of immense concern and could trigger what could be a very, very serious humanitarian crisis. We, the World Food Programme, we have already started to cut food rations to people In the month of May, we reduced rations by 50% for people not in camps because we simply don't have the money to continue. The World Health Organization has begun to close down health clinics. They call it the domino effect. As one closes after another because they simply don't have the funds to keep things going. Other activities will also be impacted, water and sanitation, the continuation of providing protection and shelter for people. All of these things are impacted. The Iraqi government works very closely with us, and we have a very good working modality with them. We in the World Food Programme, we work with the Ministry of Trade to coordinate our assistance. The Ministry of Trade runs the public distribution system, which provides a monthly food ration. That has broken down for the IDPs, and we are working with them to repair that, and in the meantime, coordinate our activities so that we provide food to everybody who needs it. The government is aware that it is an oil-rich country. And work is being done to ensure that as the economy improves in Iraq, that they begin to take responsibility for the IDPs and to take care of their people. At the moment, they simply do not have the capacity to mount a humanitarian response of this size and magnitude. And if you think about it, this is one of the very, very big operations in the world. Of course, the situation in Syria is much, much larger, but we are getting to the point in Iraq where it is quite similar. We are facing a situation with very low oil prices and a government, a new government that has also got a major war on their hands. And as I said in my opening, a third of the country is not in the control or not in the full control of the government. And a lot of the commitments are going in that direction in order to be able to stabilize the country. We have worked very hard in the international community to make sure that this appeal that we are making is as cut to the bone as possible. We are asking the international community only for the absolute needs of the country. We are aware that the whole world is stretched right now and that we have competing crises across the world. The High Commissioner of Refugees will tell you that there are more people displaced from their homes right now than any time since the Second World War. And we have crises in Yemen, in Libya, in Ukraine, in Iraq, in Syria. We have natural disasters in Nepal. We have a chronic situation in South Sudan. We have the Ebola crisis in West Africa. All of these crises need the support of the international community. So the best way we felt in Iraq to appeal is to make sure that we kept things to an absolute minimum. Everything that we ask for is absolutely needed. There is no fat on this appeal at all. It has been a very difficult process for us as we've had to prioritize one group over another. But in the current situation, we believe that this is the best way for us to appeal to people and meet the needs of the humanitarian. I'll keep going. The humanitarian response plan covers the last 6 months of 2015. It has 5 strategic objectives: specialised protection support to take care of the human rights and the situation of women and children. and also in how to each read. Humanitarian operations will maintain targeted life-saving support through essential support packages to people dependent on humanitarian assistance. Access, we will continue to try and access areas where we currently struggle in order to meet the needs of the people there. We will advocate for the safe and voluntary return of people to their homes. And we will start the work to hand over the operation to the government of Iraq by means of a cash and in-kind based social platform that will enable the Iraqi government to take care of its people going forward. Each of the various clusters that provide assistance have put together a sequenced response. If you look, you'll see that we've used water and sanitation. First line response, distribution of bottled water, emergency latrines, and soap and hygiene items. A second line response would be water trucking, provision of pumps and generators, installation of toilet facilities, recruitment of hygiene promoters. Finally, the full cluster response would be water quality monitoring, repair and extension of water and sanitation systems, and the establishment of community structures to undertake hygienic promotion. This would provide a dignified and full package of assistance to people. This is the only L3 emergency. An L3 emergency is the most critical. It's a system that the United Nations uses to define an emergency. A level 3 is the most critical. This is the only one that has a realistic exit strategy. We can see a way out of this so that the assistance that we are asking from the international community, we hope will be temporary, and that we will be able to help the Iraqi government take care of its people. We have 13 clusters that are appealing for money. $54 million for protection, $180 million for food security, $60 million for health, 43.9 for water, sanitation and hygiene, 95 shelter and non-food items, 2.5 for camp coordination and management, 26 for education, 10 million for emergency livelihoods, 5 million for cash, 12 for the rapid response mechanism, 2.4 for logistics, 0.6 for emergency telecommunications, and 6.5 million for coordination. On behalf of the World Food Programme, I'd just like to reiterate what our needs are. If you talk to the government, they will tell you that the two big needs that they have are food and health. We in the World Food Programme believe that there are 4.4 million Iraqis who are now having some level of food insecurity. We believe that we can target and reach about half of that number, 2.2 million people. These are the people who need critical food. We need $160 million in order to mount that response. Let me stop there. And thank you for your attention, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your insights, and the situation is really very tragic. We'd like to open the floor for questions and answers. Please raise your hand if you have any question and proceed to the mic in front and state your name and affiliation. And please let me know who's going to take the first question. Okay, maybe okay, Ambassador, please.
My name is Khalil Hassan. I'm Ambassador of Bahrain. I don't know what to say, but you said that the situation is worse than the time of World War II. My question, what is happening in the world? What is going on? And, you know, it's nice to treat problems. What is the role of United Nations preventing all these disasters? Father, can you say something about that?
Thank you. First of all, let me be clear. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. It is the number of people displaced is greater than any time since World War II, so the level of people without homes and shelter. I have to speak on behalf of the humanitarian community. Because I represent the humanitarian arm of the United Nations. But we are aware that these crises do need a political solution. The only thing that we can do is be ready to meet the humanitarian needs of the people who suffer because of these various crises across the world. To quote the former emergency relief coordinator, Valerie Amos, she would often make a comment about the need to be aware of the consequences, the human consequences of crises, and the need for people to understand that people suffer and that we have to come in and help them. But I don't have an answer to that. I don't think anyone has. I mean, these crises have been going on for such a long time now. But the key from our perspective is that the humanitarian needs continue to grow and people continue to suffer. And we are trying desperately to raise awareness of that so that we can help the people live a dignified life.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Takeuchi, working for International Development Journal. I'd like to ask you, what is your message to Japanese government in terms of your operation and the situation of Iraq? And also, I'd like to ask your views, your opinions about the Japanese assistance to Iraq. In particular, as you know well, Japan is concentrating on infrastructure building in Iraq, and of course, they have financial contribution to your organization, but Japan has some belief that assistance to infrastructure would be helpful for economic growth, and it will create jobs for the people, and so they have some theory of trickle down of the assistance. But what do you think of Japanese government's assistance? What is good and what is more necessary? I'd like to ask.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The purpose of my visit here is to thank the government of Japan and the people of Japan for the assistance that they have already provided, because Japan has been a great supporter of Iraq, as you very rightly say, through direct bilateral assistance to the government, but also multilateral assistance to the international community. I think it's the role of Japan in Iraq is very important also to the Iraqi people, because, as you very rightly say, the bilateral assistance has been able to create jobs, create stability. And there is a large part of the country that is stable and life does go on. You have 2/3 of the country that functions under some security constraints, but pretty much can function normally. And then you have the area, as I outlined earlier, about a third that's out of the hands of the government. And this is where the humanitarian assistance provided by the government of Japan has really made a very, very big impact. We, the World Food Programme, we've been a large recipient of Japanese assistance. We have used that for life-saving food for the people, and also for the provision of vouchers so that people can go to shops and buy their own food. And this has been very, very much appreciated by the people. We give the government and the people of Japan a lot of visibility when we provide the assistance. So when we do food distributions or we hand out vouchers, we make reference to the fact that this assistance is provided by the government of Japan. We do press releases so that there is full visibility. We've had two very high-level missions who have come to visit us, which has given us additional publicity. You'll see there me and the Vice Minister and a small Yazidi girl getting WFP assistance last year. So just to sum up, my message is thank you very much, but more is needed. And we recognise that Japan is only one country, but we want to make sure that the people of Iraq are not forgotten. Because, as I said, there are so many crises in the world that we need to make sure that we keep our various operations high on the agenda, and my visit is to do that.
Yes, next question. Okay, okay, Jean. No, it's okay. We give priority to journalists, but if there's no question, other members can ask. Thank you.
Joan Anderson from Soccer Gakkai International, and I used to work with Save the Children in Iraq, so I know it's really tragic to hear what the situation is at this point. I have a few questions. I'll try and limit it. Okay. Are there also refugees coming in from Syria who you're supporting, or that's one question? And do you know what is happening in the ISIS-controlled areas? Are they distributing food to people to try and win their hearts and minds? And then just what you were outlining about food vouchers versus food distribution, mm-hmm. What would the proportion be of both those kinds of assistance? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, yes, Iraq hosts around 250,000 refugees from Syria. That's a fairly static number now. They came across basically in one group. We, the international community, we target for assistance about 160,000 of those refugees that are housed in camps in the 3 Kurdish states. So mostly in Duhok, but some in Erbil and some in Suleimania as well. As to what is happening in areas controlled by ISIS, we know very little in reality. Very few of us, and that's us, the United Nations and the humanitarian community, but also you, the journalist, very few people have actually been. We use a system of, an informal system of telephone calls to relatives, people who are still living there, to gather information as to what the actual needs are. We, the World Food Programme, we also have a system called MVAM, which is mobile monitoring. And by telephone interviews, we gather information on the food and other situation, but predominantly on the food needs of people in these areas. These are very simple assessments. We do them on a rolling basis each month, and we put out a report each month. We know now that, as in any conflict, when conflict occurs, food prices skyrocket. You know, things can be 5, 10, 20, 50% higher in these areas that as they are in areas such as Baghdad or Erbil or other parts of the country. So we know that there is food there. We also know that the trucking fleets, so the commercial sector is functioning. So we know that there is food available. But in all of these conflict and situations, it's access to food. So there's always a worry about that strata of the population who is dependent on assistance, who may not be taken care of. We also know that a lot of displacement takes place before ISIS takes over. So we know that there's a lot of people who have already moved and who are being taken care of.
Thank you. Let me ask until somebody squeeze their brain. You said at the beginning that, I mean, you gave very pessimistic view about what's going to happen. You said the situation is going for worse, not for better. And you expected additional 1.7 million people to the needy groups. And you said we think about 14 cities will fall before the end of the year that will need our help. And we also think that destruction will spread out more. So could you please tell us why are you so pessimistic, and what's the source of your predictions? Is it like from the military or from somebody? Thank you.
When we talk about the crisis in Iraq, we talk about waves of displacement. We had the first wave in Anbar in January of 2014, and we had 200,000 people who were displaced, and we thought that was a big crisis. Then Mosul fell on the 10th of June, and we had another 300,000 people who were displaced, which took a lot of effort to go from, to a doubling in your caseload. Is a struggle to get things up and running, and so we thought that would be fine. And then we had the crisis off Mount Sinjar in August, so that was the third wave of people, and that increased our caseload by 500,000, and that was a major crisis because they all arrived together. We have now sort of settled down. We, as I said, there's regular displacement, but that's easy to cope with as you just increase, as your numbers increase, so you increase the levels of assistance going back. But we were all taken by surprise by the fall of Ramadi a couple of weeks ago, and we had been preparing for the retaking or for a battle for the city of Mosul. I think that the press has speculated on that and we've all been sort of waiting for that. So we were quite taken aback by that, and it meant that we had to reassess our contingency plans. So we have an interagency contingency plan that prepares us to the extent possible for any new displacement of people, and this is where the 14 cities are, because what we've done is we've with military strategists or former military strategists who now work for the United Nations, we have analysed the trajectory that we anticipate the fighting might take place, and looked at the populations in those areas and tried to guesstimate what that might be. When you're doing contingency plans, it is just you're working with the unknown, and the only thing you can do is be as prepared as you possibly can for anything that might happen. So that's where that came from.
Thank you. Next question, please. Yes. All right. They are very busy counting the numbers, I think, unfortunately. So let me, by the time somebody comes, I'll ask again.
Okay.
The situation in Syria, they said it's far worse. And I read today some estimation that the victims alone in Syria are 60% of the total victims of Iraq, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And the number is, as you said, also is expected to increase. So how do you think the situation in Syria might affect Iraq in the near future and your strategy? Do you have the situation in Syria in your contingency plans? Thank you.
The situation in Syria will be dealt with by the Syria operation, which runs in parallel to the situation in Iraq. We, the United Nations, we are in Iraq at the request of the government of Iraq. And so we focus our attentions on the situation there. I certainly hope that the situation doesn't get too much worse than it actually already is. I'm not sure that the situation is worse in Syria, but the numbers of displaced are greater at this point than they are in Iraq. If I may, let me just talk a little bit about what I hear from the people when I go and talk to them. I try and go out at least once a month, if not twice, and reconnect with the people. And then I go and I sit with them and I listen to their stories. I hear what the women have to say. I try and give them a voice. It's very hard to explain what it feels like to go and sit in a tent with somebody whose whole life now revolves around that very, very small tent. I was in Suleimania 10 days ago, just before coming on this trip. I went to a camp, and it was at the end of the distribution cycle. So the people were running out of food because we were planning to do a distribution the following week. But the other thing was that water was rationed because there is only so much that you can do. And so when it's very hot and the demand increases, then the camp managers had rationed the water. When I arrived, we were very concerned because there were a lot of people gathering around the water distribution site, and there was a little bit of agitation. You know, there was the women jostling each other to make sure that they got their families. And the security were a little bit worried about what might happen when you have a senior UN official who comes when a situation of desperation. They worry a little bit. So they sort of guided me off, and we went and sat in a tent with the lady. They're from the governorate of Salahaddin. Mostly communities move together. So there are some support networks. They know each other. The tribes and the sub-tribes move together. So I went in and I went into the kitchen with this lady, and she was making lunch. It was about 11 o'clock in the morning. And she had a pot of water boiling on the stove with some onions in it. And she was going to put a handful of rice into that pot. And that is what her family of 8 people were going to eat that day. She gathered around her family so we could talk to each other. One of the great tragedies of this that is hidden is the lack of education. A whole generation of children have just lost a year of their schooling in North Iraq. Those who were displaced in the south were just assimilated into the local schools. But the problem in the Kurdish areas is that they have a different curriculum. They learn in Kurdish, and they have a separate curriculum. So the children can't just be absorbed into the schools. We have had to recreate those schools. So you go in and you talk to these people, and the children, they are just desperate to get back to school. You know, I think about so many of the young people that I know whose children don't want to go to school. They're always looking for an excuse not to go to school. But these children are just desperate to get back into school. They want to continue to learn. They want a future. And this is what this appeal is about, making sure these people have these things that we take for granted. Schooling, a balanced diet, access to water, a cool environment. Imagine it's 50 degrees. That's the temperature in the shade. That's not the temperature in the sun. And that's not the temperature in a tent. So the human face of this crisis is really what this appeal is about. Everything we're asking for is for these absolute minimum standards so that these people can lead a dignified life until such time as we can get them home.
Thank you very much for your answer. We still have time. If you have any question, please raise your hand. Anybody wants a question? Yes. Do we have journalists here or? Okay, Ambassador, please.
Sorry, I'm asking another question because there are no more questions. My question is, these people who are working with you, your team, with all these crises everywhere, what is the psychology of these people? What sort of crisis in themselves you face?
We have, I can talk on behalf of the World Food Programme. I have 180 staff working on this, spread across the country. It is a very challenging job, this one, because what we do is we go from one crisis to another, and we're just watching humanitarian suffering, or people suffering, and it takes a big toll on us. We have a staff counsellor who spends a lot of time with the staff. We do structured sessions, so that the staff council will bring groups of staff in together, because a lot of times people don't realise the psychological impact that this work has until it is too late, so they won't actually look for help. So we provide that to them through seminars and workshops done by the counsellor, so that they can, we can offset any problems. But the counsellor is also available on a one-to-one basis. But whilst it's very emotionally draining, it is also very rewarding. This lady that I just talked about who was going to feed her children, I went into her tent thinking she might be rude to me, and at the end of the day she pulled me in and kissed me. And so you get these very small things that help you move along. You know that every single day, everything you do is helping those who are much less fortunate than you are. And that's a great motivator and a driving force to help us get our work done. Of course, one of the major stresses for us all in Iraq is the security situation. And we operate in a very dangerous environment, particularly our national staff, who go into areas where the internationals cannot go. I operate, and I know that my other colleagues do this as well, we have a feel unsafe, go home policy. Nobody is ever asked or expected to put themselves at risk. So we just, if the staff are coming to the office, for example, and there's violence in the city, there's a car bomb or something, they just turn around and go home. No questions asked. You don't feel safe, you just go home. Or you come to the office, whichever you want to do. And I think that's an important element of the staff. They know that they are supported. They know we will not ask any questions, because we really do need to maintain staff morale and motivation, because we have 8 million people who need humanitarian assistance, and we need people to be focused in on that and to be able to do their jobs. The first rule of humanitarian work is take care of yourself so you can take care of others. Thank you.
Yes, please.
My name is Makiko from Sankei Shimbun, the Japanese newspaper. My question is that right now the G7 summit is taking place. What is your message for them? And also, what kind of responses are you getting from other countries other than Japan? Thank you.
The message to the G7 is the same message as we have to everybody. We cannot abandon the victims of ISIL. We need to save Iraq. We have a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in front of us, and we need to have the means to deal with this. So the message is the same to everybody. We consider everybody is our partner, and everybody has a role to play in this humanitarian crisis. In terms of other donors, there is a good donor base. Japan is one of our larger donors, but we also have others as well. Australia, Germany, the United States, Canada, Republic of Korea, the United Kingdom, France, Italy. All of the donors have responded. We had a very large contribution from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia last year of $500 million. And that saved an enormous number of lives. It's very rare in a humanitarian response that we actually have enough money to plan out the future. As it is now, as I said, the World Food Programme, we've already cut rations, and I now am working month to month. I get to the end of the month, I look at how much food I have in the warehouses and how I can best use it. Having upfront funding allowed me in the past to be able to just plan for 6 months. So we thank all of our donors, but those funds are now gone, and we need more to continue our assistance.
Yes. The second question I'd like to ask you is because you have experience working in Pakistan and Afghanistan, so we know the history of that region, AFPAC. The refugee camps in Pakistan, Afghan refugees were sort of incubator for Islamic radicals, Islamic extremists, and so then I think you know very well the history, but so I'd like to know the situation in Iraq and what was the lesson from your experience in Pakistan, Afghanistan, of such a vicious cycle, and what kind of countermeasures to prevent such things happen in Iraq.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's the situation that we have in Iraq is slightly different to the situation of the Afghan refugees in Pakistan. But we are aware of that. One of the big concerns that we have is the radicalization of the youth. This is one of the reasons why getting the children back into school is so important. The other important thing is getting agriculture and getting communities functioning again. Within the appeal, there is a part of the appeal that looks at sustainable livelihoods, so that as soon as areas are liberated, we, the United Nations and our partners, we go into those areas and we re-establish communities. We try and generate the economy. We generate jobs to stimulate the economy. We will rehabilitate the agricultural infrastructure so we get people back onto the land, because we really believe very strongly that if we can get people back into some sort of normal circumstances, that this will halt the radicalization and the ability of these groups to access the youth. So, very good question, a big concern to all of us, but it is definitely something that we are very, very keen on. one of the things that I didn't mention about school feeding is, about the schools is we're trying to get the children back into schools, but we're also trying to keep them in schools. And we're particularly trying to keep the girls in schools because women are often the backbone of these societies, and it's particularly important in Iraq. So having an educated female population, we also believe will contribute to this stabilization of the country. And we, in the World Food Programme, we are looking at ways that we can provide incentives for families to make sure that their girls go to school. Because oftentimes, when life is difficult, the girls will often not go to school. And I'm not talking about Iraq, because Iraq is an incredibly educated and sophisticated country. But across the world, oftentimes it is the girls that suffer. So we have a special focus on them to ensure that we get them back into school, we get them into meaningful livelihoods so that we can protect the society as a whole.
Thank you. I think we are coming to an end, but I cannot prevent myself from asking political question. I know you are from the United Nations and you cannot answer, but I will try to make it in a different way. There is now some air bombing of the areas controlled by that IS. So do you think this air bombing is contributing better or worse to the humanitarian situation in Iraq? Thank you. That's a very simple question. Thank you.
It is very hard for us to know. We know that when the bombing raids first started, that there would be some displacement around the times. People would be given advance warning and people would move. And so we were able to protect them and take care of them. I believe now, and I'm not a military expert, I look at only the humanitarian needs of those people, and I frankly don't have time to look at this too closely. But many of the people who are going to be displaced have already been displaced around these areas. So it'll only be when cities fall that they will move again. Because what we saw in the city of Fallujah was a vicious battle, and levels of destruction that were very significant. When the first United Nations mission went into Fallujah after its liberation, they found a total population of about 100 people left in a city that had tens of hundreds of people in it, and levels of destruction that were quite phenomenal. But the people had already moved. So how these are impacting at the moment, I'm really unable to say. We're not seeing large amounts of displacement around the bombing raids. We're seeing it around the hand-to-hand fighting.
Thank you very much for your insight, and this wraps up our event. We would like to give you a 1-year honorary membership. Please come next time and tell us good news and hopeful and optimistic ideas about what's going on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody.